Okay, so we're moving towards the conclusion of the event, the Feature Store Summit, the first conference for Feature Stores and Machine Learning. Thank you to everyone who's stayed. We're going to talk about build or buy, but I think, we've a lot of interesting stuff on build, and we're not going to stick entirely to just talking about ROI and feature stores. We'll try and keep the conversation as broad as we can. So just to remind people who are on the who maybe are just joining for the panel, we have on the panel, we not everybody who talked at the previous session was able to make it. So what we have is is Cesar here on? We don't see Cesar. So we have Ritesh.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I think you've got someone's got to join you on the panel here. Cesar from Via. We have Amit from Uber. Michelangelo with Ritesh from Varo Bank, and we've Brandon Cruz from Wildlife Studios. And the topic of the panel is build or buy. And we have two companies here who bought. So there's Hopsworks and Databricks, and then we have two companies who built. But I think if we start on just I'm gonna be preferential. I'm gonna go to Amit and ask just about building, right? So like you've gone through the process of building, and what. I build systems as well, and I always find with systems, when you build them, you build, but there's always these like kind of thresholds you get to where it becomes useful. And if you're before the thresholds, it's like it's useless, and you just have to get over that threshold. So what in your experience was the threshold for Michelangelo that made it into a really useful, just at the high level thing, give people an idea of what they need to build to make it useful?
Yeah. So I think it probably might be a different experience for me because a lot of our success in Michelangelo came from scalability. And the reason people started using Michelangelo, of course, it was an end-to-end platform, was because they wanted low latency, extremely high throughput at scale, and teams did not want to sort of build their own thing for this. And so we had the charter, and that was our primary goal. So that threshold that you were talking about, we very quickly in the first couple of years crossed it. After that point, maybe we were sort of at that point where, hey, there are still people saying, we don't need this, we can do it ourselves, it's just data management. And I think we had to kind of build our story a little bit stronger on how do you push the self-service part, build quality stuff in it, like they have to actually benefit from a lot of these things, right? And so it was like this crossing the threshold, staying at this plateau, and then building rich enough functionality for people to realize that, hey, this is going to add a lot of value. And so that's the part where, we may have been a little plateaued, and then now it's like the dominantly used feature store at Uber. So I think we're way past that whole point, yeah.
So like just to summarize, I mean, you have the data problem, just getting the data to the model.
Just getting the data.
Then like getting people to trust that data, so quality of the data and scores, and then now you're at the level of search and find features and automatically build feature sets and groups and things like that.
That's right. And I mean, for a while, people still felt, hey, this is just data engineering. We'll just do this all ourselves. So
yeah, I mean. So I'll spread that question out. Feature stores are just a library for consistent features for training and serving. Has anybody got an opinion on? I'll take you. Cesar nodded briefly. I'll take you on that. Cesar, is that something that you think when you looked at this, all I need is a library for consistent training and serving, or did you read about Michelangelo and then just decide, well, we need the whole thing?
I think here when we start thinking in use of feature store, we have the main problems, as I said, that we have many features that are in each model, and these features cannot be reused. We have many of duplicate pipelines, so we have many problems that when we saw the concept of feature store, we saw a light in the end of tunnel. So we started studying feature store, and this was the main case that we chose, that we need a feature store here at VIA to solve these problems. So we first we thinking to build one. So we started studying. We looked for Michelangelo. We looked for Tecton AI, Hopsworks, and we studied many feature stores. And when we saw the entire solution, we said we don't have the right maturity now to build our own feature store. So let's think in buying some feature store that already done.
Renan, I'll put the same question over to you. I mean, did you think, well, it's just a library for transforming or serving, or did you know from the beginning we need more than just that?
Actually, we knew from the beginning, and we are the ones that also spread the word to the data scientists, so they, and also the data engineers and backend engineers, to make the distinction very clear of the difference between like maintaining like a regular pipeline and something that's is going to be dealing with what the feature store does, with like both training and serving and all the strong guarantees that we need to offer. So for us, we're clear, but we need to spend some time like convincing people. And after a while, was the opposite. People was like asking us, "Where's the feature store?" They said, "No, you need to wait a little bit," because like our value proposition was actually the platform tackling machine learning as a company level stuff, like a big priority thing. So we wanted to help data scientists to migrate from their old way of doing things and going to this more well-structured and reusable and shareable way of working. And we knew the importance of the feature store, and given that the idea was to have this platform and the ecosystem around it, make it more clear for us that it wasn't the time to actually really consider building the feature store. It was more important building the ways to create the pipelines and integrating the different tools inside the company to make this experience of training and serving and monitoring models as smooth as possible. So that's why we decided, after a lot of a benchmarking and long list of questions that we sent it to all vendors and stuff, maybe you remember ours, but we knew that we arrived in the decision, and we knew that that's the way to go. So once the platform is more mature, like in a few years, when the platform is very well mature and very well used inside the company, we can really think about like maybe updating or even changing some of these foundations, but not now. Right now, I think that using a feature store instead of buying one, building one, was the way to go.
Viral, if you can unmute, I'll just ask you then. You know, you're in the banking business, and how much was that a part of the decision to build rather than buy? Whether organizational or, you know, compliance reasons. We work with banks, so we know how it is. But or was it just that you said, well, we don't need all of everything else. We just need data management or consistent features.
Yeah, so I think and RJ, feel free to chime in later, right? I see you here as well. So from my perspective, right, and from Varo's perspective, there's a few things. There's what use cases we are trying to solve, and what problems we have at Varo. Now, obviously, it's a heavily regulated industry, and so the decision to buy versus build was more about specific use cases and what we're trying to do, right? So there is no right or wrong answer on that. Second thing is, I think even if we buy, right, or even if we build, at the end of the day, I see that everything is on top of data, right? Is on top of data lake. So we still have to build the feature store, whether we want user features, item features, transaction features, depending on what granularity we want to go, right? We still have to do a lot of that work internally. The third thing is, you know, how do we make it easy for analysts, engineers, or even data scientists to add features into the feature store, right? So there's a lot of that complexity, which is also, I mean, now there are obviously some solutions around that, but that's also part of what I consider feature platform and not just feature store, right? So feature store is just a part of the platform, but when we are thinking about the platform, there's a lot of other things, right? So I mean, those are the three things I think which were very important when we were looking into this build versus buy thing. Yeah, RJ, do you want to add anything to this? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly same thoughts, Vileko. We have been asking this build versus buy out of the context. There's so many things that influence this. I mean, definitely everything is driven by ROI. Is like whether you want to invest into building thing or is it much cheaper to buy. But there's other factor we are not considering. The culture of the company. I mean, if it is heavily engineering driven company, then people are excited to build it. There's another challenge, I mean, which will hint at banking being a regulated. There's often so many regulations we have. I mean, just within the company itself, we cannot just easily use any data. There are so much regulation around tables, and integration becomes third-party solution integration becomes a big challenge. And also, I would think, I mean, within our company, if you think, I mean, we were looking at several vendors, but it is a long-term solution. Integration, if you're buying a solution, you're making a commitment that for next 10 years or 5 years, we will be with that solution. And it takes a lot of time and effort to evaluate out of all the tens of different vendors, which one can provide you the good agility and all the features you need. And sometimes it might seem, oh, if I'm spending 1 year trying to decide the vendor and all this thing, why not just build something by then to get you moving at least. I think, I mean, so yeah, I mean, in no ways we are saying our feature store we have built ourselves and we will commit to it, but at least now we have built the components that we will need even if we are buying a solution, and at least we got our problems solved right now. And we'll see, I mean, in future, yeah, I mean, building a monitoring system for your feature store, it's a huge task. And so we might just buy some technology for that. So other interesting thing I have seen is like this has become a more like there's two different ways to think about it. There's a platform which gives you handhold everything from end to end, how you define your features, everything. And there are a lot of also component solution. For example, I can just go to one company, say, oh, can you just help me monitor my features? For example, there's Big Guy, which just focuses on monitoring. Then there are these other SageMaker or AWS, a lot of features which just provide you graphical database. And if you have the components, the challenge becomes just of integration, which we anyway we have to do, even if we are building our custom, like buying the technology. So
very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could throw that over to Ahmed on this, just the level of integration, and this is a general trend we see. You know, in the machine learning space, there's really two camps, if you want to simplify the world. You have the best of breed, which means buy the best feature store and the best, you know, serving and the best training and experimentation and integrate them. Or there's the kind of, you know, we do a platform for everything. You're ahead of kind of the curve of where a lot of companies are, you know, and you have an integrated platform. Do you see the rest of the world going in that direction, or do you see, you know, if we take databases and data warehouses, there's still many different databases and data warehouses out there. We haven't got 2 or 3 of them. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just curious, how do you see, because it is a bit more integrated, and we do have regulation coming,
Yeah.
and we do have many steps.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it going both ways. You can have a fully integrated solution like Michelangelo, works for us, proprietary, customers are all within Uber. But I can see it. But one of the things I think in retrospect, I think we started off creating the feature store as a component of the Michelangelo platform. But for a while, it lived in isolation. I mean, there were some integrations with the models and definitions, and you could just have the features out of the box. But we are finding more and more that the analytics of how the data flows and the features flow and how features are relevant, it's not just a feature store problem. You have to look at the end-to-end ML pipeline for that. And so if you want to go that route where you have a very heterogeneous components and all that, your metadata is going to be critical. And then it becomes the question of, hey, is your metadata unified enough to sort of work with whatever you may choose out there, right? Like GCP pipelines, BigQuery. So you need the ability to sort of analyze your data. Regardless, a feature store cannot just live independently. So I think, depending on your philosophy, your style of like engineering, you can go both ways. I mean, if you can have a full one-stop shop or versus heterogeneous platform. That's my take. Yeah.
Anyone else, anything to add on this kind of trend? I'll just open it up if anyone has to.
There's another, I actually joined Varo after working at 4 years at Uber. So I have seen how Michelangelo evolved. So not specific to Michelangelo, one of the biggest challenge I find when you're buying any solution is how much is commitment from the vendors to, if you get stuck with any problem, how quickly that can be solved. And so there's a lot of time involved in evaluating solutions, planning what will be the future use cases. Just to give you an example, being a regulated industry, personally identifiable information is a big thing for banking. And when we are thinking of feature stores, we are thinking of specific certain features around those, how we track model usage and like how we are sharing these features. Some of the features we want to be have access control, and there are solutions that provide some of this, but they might not provide other levels of flexibility. And then there are other solutions which don't allow access control but provide other flexibilities. So and you end up spending a lot of time trying to find the right vendor. So I guess that is also one reason a lot of the teams end up just building their own platform, because there's an agility in that.
There was a question Mahathir wrote, and he removed it, I think, but it's on that theme of access control. And I'll open this up again. Is access control at the data level, or I don't know what he means by machine learning level, but is access control any different? It would be another way of putting it, in machine learning pipelines than it is in classical analytical pipelines. Is there any difference?
Actually,
it's open for everyone.
That's a very good question. Yeah, that's actually, and I actually answered that question, but I didn't realize that once somebody answers.
That's for the panel. That was for the panel.
I see. Yeah, I think
it's
it's
a
very good question for sure. I gave my 2 cents there. I think now for different industries, it could be different. At least I think for banking, I can safely say that governance is possibly needed at both the levels. And yeah, I'm not sure what exactly ML level means. I'm assuming it means feature level, but I could be wrong. So I think both at the raw data level and then obviously the transformation level. Now at the data transformation level, right? So I think in our talk, RJ went over data transformation and vector transformation very specifically, right? And what we are calling feature store is basically everything at data transformation level, right? And so it'll be good to definitely have governance at possibly both the levels, because data lineage is important, but so is feature lineage and feature tracking and then all issues it can create with backfill and front fill, right? So I think, yeah.
I'll try to throw in one about we've experienced, right? So so one thing we have is this notion of schematized tags to annotate like features or training data sets. And it may be the case that, here's one thing that happened recently, actually. A company were creating training data, and then later on they decided we need to have some governance rules around the features, and they labeled some features as PII, but we had a bunch of training data sets there already. So our platform has support for provenance APIs. You can basically issue a query which says, get me the dependencies from these features to these training data sets, and also look for the tags then, see, because tags get inherited. So you can say train data set, show me all the features, show me all the tags, is there PII in any? Oh yes, I found one. How important are, I would say this is slightly different, you know, so being able to, not access control necessarily, but compliance for use of features. So in what context of features will they be used? You may have regulation in one area, maybe you're operating in Europe and we're going to be regulating AI, and maybe in another area you won't be. And how important is this? And this is back to Amit's point about metadata. Is metadata important for that?
Yeah, I mean, metadata is one way, but you know, Uber's obviously private data and stuff like that. Uber already has infrastructure to sort of trace this, not just at the annotation level that you mentioned, but you actually have to sometimes parse your query, come up with the syntax tree, and just like figure out what's going on with that column, where is it going, right? And so you probably also need advanced analysis. But that flow is extremely important when it comes to private data. You know, you need to be able to trace it right down to your ML level, right? Right from the upstream.
Sure.
So we are able to leverage some of the infrastructure at Uber, but yeah.
Yes.
I can give a specific example on this. I mean, because we do experience that. Being a fintech, we definitely have on one side banking, which has a strong compliance and regulation. But then there are aspects of the bank that are not related to banking. For example, we have a product partner offer ranking, and we have our operational side of the things. Now, to take example, using demographic data for lending is a big no, but using that for customer building chatbot, it should be fine. Now, this tracking, and every time we build a model, it's not that we can just roll out an experiment. It has to go we have to generate documentation, and the documentation has a big part of like what features we are using. Are they compliance acceptable with the compliance team? So one of the things we are looking for with feature store is not just management of the feature, but how much automation we can do around this documentation. So compliance team can just look at, okay, this model is currently in production, or these are the different versions of the models, and these are the features being used. They can see the metadata. So discoverability and that metadata is a huge aspect of it. The second is access control. I mean, different teams, we have access control at individual columns and table level. So now if you are building an ML platform, which is open for anyone, how do you ensure that if I'm a part of a customer care agent team, I have access to demographic data, but if I'm building a lending model, I don't have access to those features. So, I mean, just to give more contextual information, and so, I mean, it's a big use case in our area.
Sure. Carlos, Renan, do you have anything to add here?
Yes, I can add one specific use case that we have. So we are building this platform, not only for machine learning, but for all developers inside the company. Machine learning is just like a subset of the products that are being made available through there. In the very near future, people are going to be using this for studios outside our own. Now we have this expansion plan that now we are having very experienced game directors and lead designers and artists and so on having their own small studio connected to the main one. The idea is to provide the tools and the resources for them to do their creative work without that much worry about like the complexity of the infrastructure and the systems and so on. So for that, we need to really keep track of a lot of things. One of them is is metadata on stuff, to know which data is using by each product in each one of those. So it's really important for us to have this automated, because like leaving this for people to manually set up is really error prone. So one of the things that our product does is the access to the data. The way that we are doing it, the access to the data comes from you explicitly stating that you are going to be using it. So the governance and the access control are done together. So we didn't get to the level of reviewing this kind of access. This is not done yet, but at least we know exactly which product has access to which data. So this was something that was really important for us. And we also, in case of Hopsworks, the features on Hopsworks, we also needed to use the tags to get this done.
Anything to add here? Thanks, Rob.
Here at Via, we have both controls. So we have the control above the data and which one will access the pipeline with sensitive data. So inside above the data, and the moment that this data is loaded to raw, is applied some encryptations and some previous data quality to move it to context area. So all the data scientists, business analysts consume data from context area. They don't have access to raw data. So this data is already cleaned and done with sensitive data. They are already removed and they can work without any problems. And in the case of pipelines, we have a control of a data scientist only works with the only see the pipelines that he already built or the pipelines they are related with their business areas. They can see all the features, but the pipelines he only see the pipelines related with the business area that he are working.
I got to ask a slightly different question. Ritesh brought one up there about automating as much as possible. And this came up in the earlier session in future feature stores. And, I think Uber are pushing really the boundaries here. And we saw, for example, there was a debate earlier about schema. You should have schema and schema. And then the questions whether schema is enough, whether we need to know, how a feature is used. Is it categorical? Is it numerical? Data mining, you mentioned, Amit. You said that, you have this data. How important is data mining and what level of, where are we going? What's the boundaries of where we can go in terms of automating and data mining? And when you have huge scale problems, is that a factor, or is it really just because I know you talked about, for example, mutual information as a mechanism that in your block. We've looked at that. It's very expensive, computationally expensive. So do we need is there a lot of new things going to happen here, or?
Yeah. So we have a working system based on mutual information. And so we have, there is scale issues, but it's solvable. But I think the reason I brought this up is because feature sharing, right? I mean, this is all related to that conversation of sharing, and I completely agree with one of the speakers earlier. Is the higher you go in the abstraction level, or the more reuse there is. Like you go up to the warehouse level and you have just basic stats, right? Like aggregations, and they get very reusable. So, but at the feature level, it's more challenging. I wouldn't say they're not reusable, but they're not very easily reusable. And that is where we are pushing the boundary, at least on this data mining. We have this many thousands of features. We know a lot of features tend to be very specific to models. I mean, that is the reality. But we don't want to just stop there and say, that's life. Just people still want reusability, shareability, very much what people are looking for. But at that scale, it starts falling apart. And it's also because of these other reasons where feature transformations tend to be very specific to the model. You're using deep learning model versus some tree-based model. Tree-based model, you're going to do more manual feature engineering, stuff like that. So there's those considerations. So given these data signals, and we know, I'll give you a concrete example as where through mutual information, for example, we were able to find that aggregation over 1 week was adding no value from aggregation over, I'm just saying 2 weeks. Right? And so there is a lot of opportunity there to find out what's in your feature store, because it just over time people just add so many features.
Yeah.
And so we have a production system that is trying to do all this, and it's one of the tools to manage the sort of the explosion of features and sort of make them more reusable. Like, why is this team using a very similar feature to this? Because my mutual information is showing that, hey, they're very closely related. So that's how we are tackling the problem. Like, we want to figure out this shareability thing, but we also want to cut down more than shareability. I mean, shareability will be a big win, but just features don't get cleaned up enough. so that's probably one of the primary sort of goals.
I think most people will be able to relate to that, and there's a cost, of course, involved. I'm going to go around with one last question because we're running out of time, and I guess it's ROI, the return on investment. And the canonical example is, of course, Uber Eats that you mentioned. I mean, it's generating huge revenue, I guess, to the company. And when I talk to people who say, well, how important is machine learning? I kind of say, well, if you've got an Uber Eats app which says you can get your food delivered in 23 minutes, and the competitor says between 30 and 60 minutes, everybody goes to Uber Eats. So it's like there is a winner takes all kind of aspect to a lot of the value add that machine learning can give. If you have the best computer games around and it's more interactive, you'll get a huge, so in terms of calculating ROI, I kind of feel like many people are in the same position as startups are, that we're going to be huge. It's a huge, bet this amount and the return will be this much, but it's hard from a business to kind of, and many people who are listening here are in that position, trying to talk to senior management and say, how do you calculate ROI? What's the best way to do that? And the best way to talk to management about how to invest in infrastructure, like a feature store, but in general for machine learning and ML. We can go around the room to take that. We can start with Rena there. We go around.
That's a great question. Actually, a very hard one. We don't have like a definite answer for that. Some people prefer to think about like reduction of costs, infrastructure costs. Some people prefer to focus on the reduction of time between iterations, because for some teams that kind of reach a plateau where all the improvements are just like incremental. So it's basically like every team that has been running for a while, the larger the number of iterations that can get done inside a week, the better for them, because they can try out different ideas and different stuff. So it really depends on the team. And as a company, we don't have a unified solid answer. And I would say that it really depends. As any
number of
problems,
models, number of models put in production per data scientist, you can increase that KPI. Ritesh.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, ROI, we want to always think in monetary term, but the problem is, what is the time frame we are thinking about? Is it like 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? So I guess, I mean, that's what I was thinking. It's also what it depends the skills that you have within the company. For example, if I have someone who has worked at Tecton and who is completely familiar with Tecton and limitations, I mean, then I know we can just buy the Tecton solution and implement things, because it will be much faster. But if the engineers are still evaluating different solutions, it might be just easier to quickly build something that works for now. So, I mean, it's a very hard question. I mean, ROI for build versus, if it's, I mean, in startup, I would say buying a solution which is completely isolated might be easier, but when a solution that integrates with and touches a lot of components takes a lot of time. So, for example, you can just buy completely Zendesk solution for managing customer calls and everything, but a feature store is one part of this whole ML platform. So, and it has to integrate with a lot of the other solutions. So that becomes a huge challenge. So, I mean, yeah, I mean,
I guess when you build, you don't typically have to write a proposal to management bit ROI. You just go for it.
Yep. And then you have a plan as like how it will integrate with the rest of the components that you have.
Right. Cesar.
And I think the first thing that we have in mind is build our own feature store, because we don't have an investment. So we just have a time spent of our developers, and we don't have to plate an investment. So when we talked about buying a feature store, I showed the possibility of the game. I talked with the data science and discovered the 30% of productivity that they lose building their queries, ABTs. And it's only a possibility. I don't have the right knowledge that this is work. The feature store, it really works. So I can only prove that feature store works when it's already implemented, and then I show the numbers for my boss, for my manager. So it's really difficult to defend this if you can try this inside your business.
Right. And Amit, we'll finish with you. I mean,
Yeah, sure. So ROI, think of like 2-3 dimensions here. One is, if I was buying versus building, I would just like look at dollar amount per like QPS per dollar. I mean, you can get QPS. I can use AWS, but can I do millions of QPS at low cost? So stuff like that. So that's an important consideration to me. The second one is dev velocity. Some people, one of the presentations said 3 weeks to build model, 11 months to productionize. Is a feature store type, whatever you prototype, show to your leadership management. Can you get that time down to maybe 1-2 months to production? Big win. Third is tech debt. People we know build their own custom pipelines. They think it's all easy. Once you have thousands of pipelines, just way too much debt, hidden debt, on calls, measure your pager duty like overhead and things like that. So there are several ways to make a case for ROI here, and you just have to look at all these considerations and build versus buy.
great. That's good advice to finish up on. Thanks everyone for the panel being great, and thanks for all your opinions. I see there's a couple of questions. If you want to jump on Slack, you can answer those. I think one was for you, Ritesh.